Andres from AA Sports. Finally, the video you all have been waiting for. The Copa America was this summer, and Argentina walked away as the champions, winning back-to-back Copa Americas in 2021 and now 2024. 16 teams competed in the tournament. Here are the grades I give for each of the teams. Starting with Group A, from the top with Argentina, A grade. Argentina and this generation of players, this roster is nothing short of amazing. The offensive front in the starting 11, Messi, Di Maria, McAllister, they may not have scored many goals, maybe not as lethal as in the World Cup, but Argentina said, no worries, because we have players like Lautaro Martinez, Julian Alvarez, and Garnacho. All these guys on the bench who are normally undisputed starters at their clubs. So if our starting 11 won't, score, they will make you overwhelmed, and our substitutes on the bench will come in and finish the job. And when the offensive players and subs struggled to score, even then it was okay, because Argentina had and still has an elite defense that played at an elite level, especially in the final. They only conceded one goal to Ecuador. Argentina, in my opinion, had one of the best, if not the best, defense in the summer football tournaments. And when it was down to the wire in penalties against Ecuador, this team still showed no fear or nervousness, because, in my opinion, Emiliano Martinez, Dibu Martinez, is the best goalkeeper in the world right now. And Argentina and this team know that. The talent and depth this team has had since 2020 really is nothing short of incredible. In my opinion, this team is the best national team roster of all time. The best of the golden generations. Better than Spain's team that won the 2010 World Cup and Euro in 2012. Better than Germany's team that won the World Cup in 2014 and then the Confederations Cup in 2017. I'd say it's better than all of those teams. Argentina right now is not only an international dynasty, but in my opinion, they are the best international dynasty in history. The question now is, what's next? Angel Di Maria, in his final tournament, his final games with Argentina, retiring from international football as a champion. And hopefully he can do the same in Portugal with Benfica one more time. Messi, in what will likely be his final Copa America, while not in the best form, still scored in the semifinal match and walked out as a back-to-back champion. In my opinion, Messi should do what Di Maria has done, and that is retire as a champion from international football and play the upcoming World Cup qualifier game versus Chile, which will be in Argentina, as a final match in your home country to, for Messi to end his international career. I would prefer he retires from international football on top of the world as a champion than end it on like a potential sour note in 2026 if they don't win the World Cup. Will Messi do that? Or will he continue on? We'll see. Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure is that this team and its future prospects and players such as Alejandro Garnacho, who is also part of this Copa roster, look amazing. They entered the tournament as defending champions and walked out as champions again. A grade for Argentina. Moving on to Canada. How about this Canadian team, man? After an abysmal performance at the World Cup and blundering the CONCACAF Nations League and barely qualifying for the Copa America, Canada made serious changes and adjusted well. They had 2 preparation games against European teams to test themselves and improve their skills to help elevate the level of the team. And it worked. Canada looked like the most improved team, and they were the last CONCACAF team standing when many did not expect them to be. It's also worth noting that the 2 times they did lose was in the group stage and semifinals to the eventual champions in Argentina. I give them an A grade. This was a good tournament for Canada. It's a very strong, much improved squad. Moving on to Chile's national team this Copa America, D grade for Chile. They only lost to Argentina 1-0 in the final minutes of the game. That saw Lautaro Martinez finally crack Chile's defense. Their other 2 group stage games against Canada and a struggling Peruvian team ended in scoreless draws, which was not good enough to advance to the quarterfinals. The draw against Canada wasn't as much a surprise, but their draw against Peru was abysmal, especially given that they had 65% of the ball possession in that game. They were only one of 2 teams in this summer's tournament to not have scored a single goal. They have a great defense and Diego Valdez in the midfield, but they have absolutely no offense. That's nothing positive for them as they enter the next round of World Cup qualifiers. And now ending off Group A, Peru. D as well. They were not expected to make it out of the group stage given their poor form in World Cup qualifying so far. And that poor form was shown in this tournament. I was considering giving Peru an F grade, but given they did pull off a draw against Chile and only lost 1-0 and 2-0 against Canada and Argentina, instead of getting absolutely killed, I'll be generous. I give them a D grade. Moving on to Group B, starting with Venezuela. Venezuela, in my opinion, gets a B+ grade. They surpassed my expectations and the expectations of others as well, winning their group when they were expected to finish 3rd and go down. They won their first game 2-1 against Ecuador and pulled off a historic win against Mexico that saw them beat El Tricolor for the first time ever in a tournament match. And then to seal all 9 points, they dismantled Jamaica 3-0. Unfortunately, the hype didn't last long nor age well, as they did end up losing to Canada in penalties in the quarterfinals. While they were competitive and have improved, it's also worth noting they did look shaky in this tournament, which is why I give them a B grade. They conceded a goal to a 10-man Ecuador, and Mexico's offense and right side was one of the reasons that Venezuela ended up walking away with the win, as Mexico's offense and right side struggled and couldn't score with majority ball possession. So they didn't advance in the prettiest of ways. Nevertheless, they won their group. They have improved compared to years past, and I do believe they will qualify for 2026. So B+ grade. I think this is a respectable grade and a respectable result in the tournament for Venezuela. Ecuador, C- grade. Ecuador, as I expected, made it out of the group. However, they survived the group stage in ugly fashion. An early red card to Ecuadorian striker Ener Valencia against Venezuela resulted in them losing 2-1, and Valencia being out for most of the tournament. Just another bad moment as Ecuador's offense continues to struggle, and they struggled in this tournament. The offense was non-existent against Mexico as well, and the Ecuadorians were being outplayed for most of that game and were saved by the fact that Mexico decided not to play with 2 9s up front and had counterproductive players like Jorge Sanchez and Alexis Vega on the field. While the defense played great and took Argentina all the way to penalties, the offense is something Ecuador will have to improve on going forward if they want to once again have a strong qualifying campaign and be competitive in 2026. Hi, now moving on to Mexico. F. I'll make a separate video breaking down Mexico's group stage elimination. And that kind of just fracaso. I'll make a separate video breaking down Mexico's group stage failure. But to keep it short and honest, this was abysmal. They got a win against Jamaica, but Mexico actually had a chance to win the group, given they were outplaying Ecuador and were evenly matched with Venezuela. This is what happens when the coach doesn't adapt and lacks experience. This is what happens when you keep playing more of the same players who are clearly not good enough for the team. And look, when Edson Alvarez went down with an injury and Cesar Montes had to come out of the second game as well with an injury, those were big losses. I get it. But even then, with a brilliant youth development program and U20 and U23 teams, you're telling me you can't find 11 excellent players and others to add depth in the case of injuries or illnesses? With a national population of almost 130 million people, you're telling me you can't build up the team around your strong defense, your good goalkeeper in Luis Malagon, an amazing young striker in Santi Jimenez? You're telling me that Charlie Rodriguez, Uriel Antona, and Jorge Sanchez are better than Oziel Herrera, Efrain Alvarez, Rodrigo Huescas, and Julian Araujo? And that you're telling me that Guillermo Martinez is suddenly good enough at 29 years old to play for Mexico when he was only called up one other time in his entire career? No. I made a video explaining the Mexican football crisis prior to the summer tournaments, explaining why Mexico, instead of being World Cup champions and an elite national team, is arguably one of world football's biggest underachievers. I'll try to put a link to it in the description or in the comments. But to keep it short and honest, this fracaso was the result of everything I said in that video. This is what happens when there is extremist management in the federation. This is what happens when you put money and sponsors first instead of putting results first, knowing that the money will follow directly after. This is what happens when, like Tuca Ferretti stated, happens during his time as the interim coach. You impose players on the coach and team just to promote a Liga MX club or sponsorship. This fracaso is the result of imposing players and then having the audacity to tell the coach, if you don't succeed with the players we imposed on you, you're fired. This was not a generational change. This was a money grab for the Mexican Football Federation. And for fans, especially Mexican fans in the US, they need to stop going to games here in the US. If we want change for the better, we need to punish the Federation and stop going to games in America. And then they will get the message and we will see change for the better and a better roster come 2026. The only thing positive was our defense, which played great the entire tournament. Mexico won against Jamaica thanks to the one goal scored by our left back, Gerardo Arteaga, but there needs to be changes to the midfield. And fans need to put pressure on the Federation to make those changes. F grade for Mexico. Again, I'll make a separate video breaking down Mexico's performance. Before I move on to the next team though, I have a poll in the community section of this channel. I want to see what you all think regarding Mexico's Copa America fracaso. Who do you think is most to blame for Mexico's failure? Feel free to cast your vote in that poll in the community section. Now, moving on to Jamaica, who finished last in the group. This was an F grade as well. They were not competitive at all in this tournament, despite having 15 players playing at the club level in UEFA and Europe. Now, granted, there have been some very serious issues at the federation level as well, and it's gotten to a point where some of the players, including Leon Bailey, have stepped away from the national team in protest. Even without those issues, I still don't think it would have changed much. This team just simply isn't at the level of the other three that were in their group, and it showed as they lost all three group stage games. Now, on to the teams in Group C, starting with Uruguay. And I'll give Uruguay an A grade. In what will likely be Luis Suarez's final Copa America, Uruguay topped their group in very strong fashion, including dropping 5 goals on Bolivia. Unfortunately, they just had it really tough in the knockout phase, having to deal with an always tough Brazilian team where they survived in penalty kicks and then had to play a tough Colombian side that had greatly improved and was very lethal throughout the tournament. Nevertheless, they finished third in the tournament, and I think it was a very positive tournament for Uruguay, even though they failed to reach the final. Panama, B+ grade. Panama was not expected to make it out of their group, but with Greg Berhaltering the U.S. men's national team and Tim Weah's awful red card, Panama capitalized on the opportunity given to them and got an important win against the Americans. And with them being better than Bolivia, got 2 wins and finished a respectable second in their group. I will say there were some shaky moments. Adalberto Carrasquilla's red card nearly caused a fight on the field in their game against the U.S., and conceding a goal to Bolivia made that game much more competitive than it should have been. But nevertheless, they exceeded initial expectations by making it to the quarterfinals before getting destroyed by Colombia. So a B grade is fair here, B+ specifically, as one of only 2 CONCACAF teams to make it out of the groups. Panamanian football has definitely improved, and they will likely qualify for 2026. But they will need a little more in order to hopefully make it out of the group stage in 2026. Finishing the grades for Group C with Bolivia, and I'll make short work of my grade for Bolivia, F. Along with Peru, they were one of the worst teams entering this tournament, and in the preparation friendlies for the Copa, their starting 11 lost to Mexico's U23 team. That was basically a preview for the house of horrors that was to come in the group stage of this tournament that eventually saw them get blasted 5-0 against Uruguay, losing all 3 group stage games and having the most goals conceded. They walked away as the worst team in the tournament. Yikers. Moving on to Group D, the final group in the Copa America, starting with Colombia. I'll give Colombia an A grade this Copa America. Colombia topped Group D and, along with Costa Rica, spoiled the party for Brazil in the group stage after holding them to a 1-1 draw. They were very lethal throughout the tournament, winning 3-0 against Costa Rica and dropping 5 goals on Panama's improved squad in the quarterfinals. They made it all the way to the final, facing off against Argentina. Colombia took them into extra time and were holding strong against the Argentinians, even outplaying them at times, with 19 shots, 4 shots on target, and 56% of ball possession in that game. However, with 50% of tackles won, 24 clearances, 12 interceptions, 7 shots blocked, and 4 saves from Dibu Martinez, Colombia was simply unable to crack Argentina's elite defense. And Argentina, in extra time, with Lautaro Martinez, while players got tired, were able to get that extra drive to score. The Colombians, they did nothing wrong in this tournament. They are a golden generation this cycle. That was just simply beaten by a stronger golden generation. Even though they lost the final, the Colombian national team should hold their heads up high. I really like this team and their well-rounded style of play. And again, I do believe for this 2026 cycle, they are a golden generation with many of their players in their prime form. Look for them to be just as lethal throughout the rest of the World Cup qualifiers. A grade for Colombia. Now, to the Group D runner-up in Brazil, B minus. Brazil, as expected of them, made it out of the group stage. However, it wasn't in the best of ways. Brazil's 0-0 draw against Costa Rica, while having almost 75% of ball possession in that game, raised the red flag that while this team is very good and will make it into the knockout phase of the Copa, they weren't good enough to win it this year. For Brazil's standard and the players they have, their offense struggled in this tournament. They just could not get the ball in the back of the net against Costa Rica, despite never having a single moment where they needed to defend in that game. Lucas Paqueta missed a penalty kick wide against Paraguay, and they were unable to score against Uruguay in the quarterfinals despite having 60% of ball possession, resulting in them losing in penalties. I think Brazil's lack of offensive power in this tournament was what ended up being their undoing. Whether it's because of a certain style of play from head coach Dorival Jr. or the players struggling to work together as a team at the national level, who knows? I think it definitely could be a struggle to work as a team among the players. However, with 3 offensive players in Rodrigo, Vini Jr., and now Endrick playing at Real Madrid, I think that will help the offensive front in terms of any issues working together as a team. And as we have seen with Endrick, Brazilian prospects for the future always look good. So this team will still remain competitive. There just needs to be some improvement to score goals. B minus for the Brazilians. Costa Rica finished 3rd in the group, and I'll give them a B plus grade for their Copa America performance. Give them credit, they were much more competitive than any of us expected them to be. They pulled off one of the best single game defensive performances we have seen in football over the last couple of years, drawing against Brazil while only having 26% of ball possession and playing with 5 defenders, with even their center midfielder coming in as a sixth defender when needed. That draw surely felt like a win, as they were a wall that Brazil couldn't break through. Unfortunately, their defensive strategy didn't go so well in their second game against the Colombians, who were and still are in the best form of any of the teams that were in this group. And they ended up losing 3-0, putting them in an uphill battle to advance. In their final group game, they did what they needed to do on their part and won 2-1 against Paraguay, thanks to goals from Calvo and Alcocer. But unfortunately, they didn't get the outside help they needed to advance on, as the Brazilians tied their game against Colombia to just edge them in the standings. A sad ending for Los Ticos, but nevertheless, they shouldn't be ashamed of their performance given they were in the toughest group. They managed to find hope, find some sort of life in the group of death, and the ability to be competitive regardless if they advanced out of the group or not. So I think a B plus grade is solid. And now last and least is Paraguay. The saying normally is last but not least, but I'm saying last and least for Paraguay because they finished last in their group and did not have a good tournament. They got thrashed against Brazil 4-1, and Andres Cuba's red card in the 81st minute just made that loss worse. They were a bit more competitive against Colombia, only losing 2-1, but it is also worth noting that they only had 32% of ball possession for that game and had already conceded the 2 goals to Colombia before Julio Enciso scored. And their loss against Costa Rica definitely is nothing positive when Paraguay should be better, given they play in CONMEBOL and have a larger player pool than Los Ticos. So overall, not good for Paraguay, who will definitely have an uphill battle to qualify for the World Cup. Despite losing all 3 games, I'll grade them on a curve given they were in the group of death. and I'll give them a D grade. Let me know what you all think in the comments. What grade would you give for one of these teams and why? That is all for me in this video. Stay tuned for my Euro team grades video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.